Ladies and gentlemen, 147th day of the Russian invasion and the 9th year of the war of Russian Federation against Ukraine. I'm Evgeny Shevchenko, and on behalf of Media Center and Ukrinform, I would like to welcome all of the journalists who are telling the whole world about our fight for freedom. And our current guest is Tymofiy Mylovanov, the president of the Kyiv School of Economics, the Minister of Economic Development in the years 2019-2020, and now the advisor to the Chief of Staff of the President's office. We'll talk about a broad range of issues, but first, Tymofiy, what's the current status of the Ukrainian economy, and which developments would you advise to follow and monitor closely? Thank you. Well, exchange rate is what's on everybody's mind. You can look at the difference between the official exchange rate and the exchange rate in the exchange currency exchange kiosks. Well, and it's all based on the macroeconomic challenges that the Ukrainian economy is facing. During the war, the national budget expenditures increased to support the military and to support those people who, because of war, ruination, and killings, are either IDPs or refugees leaving the country, and failure to be able to use certain infrastructure. So the business goes down, the taxes are being reduced, and we could cover the gap with borrowings, where either domestic markets or international markets, we borrow the money. Well, in theory, but in practice, the domestic borrowings are limited. There were more at the beginning of the war, but people are running out of money, like business, and so while at the international market, they only claim that they will give us money, but then we read in the mass media that Germany starts asking questions and delays the transfer of money, or there are some other problems arising, and this difference is monetized through emission of the central bank. Plainly speaking, printing money. Well, not physically printing money, but the National Bank of Ukraine buys out the borrowed obligations of the governments. If it continues for a while, there will be crisis. We'll have 2, 3, maximum 4 months to have enough reserves in the economy, but we need to increase the borrowings and the support from our international friends. They need to start increasing the funding and be more careful how we spend money inside the country. Yesterday, we read in the news that the Ukrainian government offers a 2-year moratorium to pay our debts. Well, this is a symptom that we need external funding. According to certain forecasts, this year the GDP reduction optimistically will be 35%, but I heard figures 40, 35, and even 50%. Well, are there any recommendations at all what you can do under such circumstances? Dramatic to say the least. Well, it's all about whether we're talking about the company or an individual. If you are a military and are at the front lines, well, then the economy would not be your top priority, which is true for the whole frontline region. There is no market economy there to speak of, but in the rare, the economy exists. Currently, and it will be for years to come, the biggest client will be the army. So the business should think, what should they do for the victory, to receive the orders from the government, from the military units, or do something that is needed to bring the victory closer. This is the general fundamental trend which stays on. We in Kyiv Economic School raised the fundraising campaign to support the army, which demonstrated that some people who had nothing to do when the war started, well, they have something to do now, which is important. If you're an employee in a company or you've been fired or laid off, well, the situation is different. But anyway, According to the poll survey, up to 35% of people lost their jobs. So being employed is important. So I would be more proactive in company to become valuable for your employer and discuss how your salary will depend on the fluctuations of the exchange rate so that you will have some understanding of the future. If you have any savings in hryvnia, well, then I will take care of efficiently spending them or saving them. Well, this is a separate long discussion. As to the drop in the GDP, all those figures, 35%, that's the preliminary forecast of IMF, and 45% that's from the World Bank. Well, for a certain extent, they take it from the sky. There are no real dates about the wartime economy in Ukraine. Probably by the end of this calendar year, the State Statistics Committee will have some data. But currently, we have only forecasts. We take other countries like Afghanistan, Syria, or Gaza sector, where they had similar similarity in the eyes of their forecasters. And they say, well, there were 68% of gas services in 2014, which means that in Ukraine they will lose 5 million workplaces. Well, but in Kyiv, in Ukraine, the economy didn't drop like in Syria, Iraq, or the Gaza sector. Well, of course, there will be challenges with exportation, with agriculture, and with domestic market services, which dropped a lot from mass media to coffee shops and restaurants. The whole service industry dropped, and the most famous brands do survive, but even they will have to simplify their offers to make their services or products more accessible. Everybody will have to transform. People or businesses, if they want to survive and have job, they will have to transform themselves. Оксана Поліщук, Ukrinform. Moving to wartime economy track, what does it mean? Thank you. Some people believe that it was like it was in the movie. Everybody works for the benefits of the front lines. Like recently, Victory Spots, in the interview to Ukrainian Pravda, she said that people sit in the coffee houses during war, but if coffee houses are not working in Kyiv, there will be no taxes paid to buy the ammunition with, because the financial support that is given could not be used to procure guns. That's why our economy needs to work. For us, for Ukraine, the wartime track economy means strong economy in the rear that pays taxes. And that's what I'm saying. We need to support businesses. But often enough, they ask me to make a payment not to the self-employed business's account, but directly to a bank card. Like they ask me, can you pay directly to our card? So not even paying 5% as a single taxpayer. 5%, even 10% is what we can share for the needs of the army. I'm not talking about 30%, but zero is definitely incorrect. It's important for our economy to operate and be as strong as possible so that the money we earn will pay people their salaries and pay taxes, because that's where the weapons are paid for. So for us, that's frontline and strong economy. Well, to what extent it's possible, of course. Back to the issue of financial system and exchange rates. Right now we have exchange rate, a fixed one and market rate. So we're talking about some transition option. Which option the presidential office supports? Having the fixed rate and gradually increase it, or switch to market mechanisms altogether. I have no right to comment the position of the president's office now. because it might impact the markets. When I was at the board of the National Bank, I also told them I'll wait for the government to decide. Well, I'm not an economist. At the beginning of the war, fixing the exchange rate was fully justified. Otherwise, there might be a panic, and if there are substantial fluctuations in the exchange rate, it might disbalance the whole economy at the beginning of the war, especially in the first weeks or months even. And we can see how the macroeconomic system, financial system survived. Banks kept working, payments kept being made, which is extremely important. There were no, but it's like the reserves of the body. Your immune system, even if you are a strong person with a strong immune system, it will not survive for years and months. And that's what we observe now. That's why we have a markets rate 36, 37, and we can see that it fluctuates. It used to be 35, while there is a fixed exchange rate of the National Bank, of the central bank, and for a long time it won't be able to change it. The Bank of England, of Canada, Federal Reserve System, nobody can keep the fixed rates when the structural changes are occurring. So the central bank of any country would not be able to do this. They will be forced to reflect the real market's exchange rates somehow, and it will depend on the situation on the front lines. Within months, within not even years, they will have to do that. Will they fix it or have a flexible rate? It will depend on how viable are the markets. If the markets are strong, it will be flexible. If not, there will be regulatory intrusions. And the economy will depend about whether Ukraine gets borrowings from our friends. Then the rate would be more flexible. If not, then the rate should be reconsidered. But it's like with a physician, how to cure a patient. Sometimes the patient can deal with the disease him or herself, but if only in critical situation the doctor will be involved. Well, what will be those signs? Budget deficit, first of all, and the emission and monetization. Which part of the budget gap budgetary deficit will have to be funded from the central bank or by the banking system through emission? Can you share those figures with us? No, I cannot. It's private information. 105 billion, more actually. There is public information at the Ministry of Finance website. The National Bank, you will see there, funds more than the half of the budget deficit in that period of time. If not the half, at least the biggest share. We have another question.
Two main issues dealing with economy is grain and gas. Also, the first question is, will Ukraine stop import gas? And the second question is there any safety for ships to approach Ukrainian ports and export the grain from them?
All right, thanks. I'll start with the, or should I do Ukrainian? Or? Okay, so I'll start with the ships. The negotiations in Turkey, we all read it in the news. I know approximately the same information that you do, maybe a little bit more, and we expect that as the United Nations recently announced, there are good chances that the agreement for United Nations convoys out of Odessa will be reached soon. I really hope it will happen because the entire world depends on this. Food security is going to be, you know, recently Kristalina Irina Georgieva, I think about a week ago, mentioned that the commodity shocks, pricing in agriculture and energy, they're already spilling over in the global economy outside of these markets. So the war in Ukraine and the high commodity prices have effects already globally outside of the immediate conflict. So it is important that we get the shipping out of Odessa, because without Odessa, we increased our capacity to export, and it's currently probably about 2.5 million tons a month, but it used to be 5. And I know that some of the agricultural companies in Ukraine, they are able to sell 5 to 10% of that is single digits of what they plan to. That means they will, 2-3 more months and they will be shutting down. That means there will be no sowing or planting season in the fall. They'll all kinds of consequences will be happening, not just pure export. So we need to resolve this problem. I think it will be resolved. I expect that fundamental political forces will ensure that it's resolved maybe sometime by default. The second question was on gas. Ukraine buys gas from Europe, not from Russia. But also we have our domestic production. And during the war, our domestic consumption, especially in the industry, has decreased quite a bit. So in principle, our domestic production has also been damaged, but not significantly. So in that sense, the balance looks better than before the war, although overall values have decreased. And it's unfortunate that the consumption has decreased because the industry is being damaged. So we think we will be okay, but the government has set up a task force this month working on ensuring that we pass through the season. But of course, let's say we have gas, then you can attack gas transformation system or pipelines. So you need electricity. If you diversify to electricity, you can in principle attack or send missiles into the electricity. So I think the solution here, you have to be very diversified and very mobile and very localized in this. That's important.
And just one word on the ports. From what we see in the news, the only ports that we can use right now are the fresh water river ports at the Danube, and we cannot use the seaports as of the moment currently.
Right, so the Danube ports allow to export. We have increased some of the capacity to export through the new ports by 500,000 tons, and it's probably at 1.5. Another million is through the railroad, but that's not close to be enough. Bring it back to 5 million that were. We also will see substitution in the future behavior of the agricultural companies. They will stop planting, so they will move into sunflower and heavy oil, into oil-intense grains, because that means higher price per ton. So there will be also structural changes in the type of grains, and that is damaging because Ukraine used to have up to 10, sometimes even 13 in good years, percentage of exports of wheat, and sometimes up to 18% of sunflower seeds and also corn. So corn might, the agricultural companies will start planting less corn, and maybe, they'll be switching into sunflower, I think, and other oil type of grains.
Ще запитання в залі? Прошу.
Продовжуємо.
Let's move on with this. And speaking about the recovery of the Ukrainian economy after the war, and we hope that it will happen soon enough. What is the amount for recovery? 750 billion, right? There might be a couple of factors. The economists think, and people who work on the recovery programs, like hurricanes in the US or wars in Syria, there are three figures. The first one, direct losses. Direct losses, this building disappeared, how much it will cost to rebuild it. Right now it's about $100 billion, sorry. Next are what is called needs, what needs to be reconstructed. Like, if this building is ruined and damaged, and it's old, well, we will rebuild it with new modern technologies. It will be green, it will be energy efficient. So these type of costs, $165 billion. So if we rebuild everything and using new technologies, that's $165. There is the evaluation of how we need to survive the winter. That's between 17 to 65 billion dollars, depending whether we calculate the needs of the army as well. And then 750 billion dollars. That's the figure for 10 years. If we want to rebuild modern economy. That's 75 billion investments a year, and most of them will go into the energy sector, and the largest portion will go into the logistics, and the third largest will go into the construction, housing, clinics, universities, schools. Thank you for clarifying the figures. What can we expect from our international partners in this regard? And as a follow-up to this question, we'd like to get a feedback from you on the Lugano conference. We have claimed quite ambitious goals, but what we heard from our Western and international partners and financial organizations, does it inspire you? Well, we talked about 750 billion, what we want to invest into our economy within the next 10 years. 1/3 might be private funds. That's quite an ambitious figure, and that's a dream. And if we can do it, then truly Ukraine will be a developed economic nation. But now we also claim that only to support the macroeconomic stability, we need 20 to 30 billion dollars, additional 20 to 30 billion army needs. And then last day was the session of declarations, and so far it was for 1.9 billion, how much they declared they're ready to give us. While this 1.9 billion dollars, that's money now in hand, but we need a year between 30 to 100 billion. So systematically, technocratically, we need to progress here, and hopefully the progress on SAP will help to deblock certain processes. IMF hopefully will launch their program soon. It would be great if our partners are not delaying with giving us 9 billion of macroeconomic support. Lots of concrete technical work could be done now. Of course, there are certain problems on our part, but what I'm most afraid of is that some people claim, well, mid-level bureaucrats, they say, let's see the development of the front lines first. Or they say, let's come back to this come fall. So they live in a different world. Each day they kill people here and we lose territories, and they think that, oh, I'm not criticizing anyone here. I'm just sharing with you what impressions I had while talking to people. I talk to a person from a top financial institution, and that person tells me, well, it's a vacation time now, and we will not be able to prepare the program. It's possible in September. How many people will die by September, you know? And Switzerland gave us 100 million francs. Or euros, well. But in Lugano, an apartment costs 1 to 2 million, so they gave us 50 apartments. So they gave us one building, and we have dozens of thousands ruined. So they just don't understand the scale of this war. For them, it all looks abstract and distant. Not to all of them, but to a lot of them. Any further questions, please? My last question is about the blocked assets of Russia all across the world, but we haven't received anything from those seized assets. The amount of blocked assets reach 540, even $550 billion, huge amount indeed, incomparable with 750 billion, well, looking forward into 10 years, there will be political pressure to confiscate those funds, because how an average European politician things. Taking $1 or euro of his taxpayers' money, and he needs to explain why he gives it to Ukraine and not invest into local school. So there's always opposition and other people who try to run the hype here, plus Russian propaganda, of course, to boot. So it's easier to take a Russian dollar and say, Russians started it, and I give it to them. And their domestic political market supports this. But practically speaking, it's very difficult to achieve because you need to justify it politically, pass the law, and then in the courts. And of course, Russia will litigate. So a lot would depend on the political will of the politicians. Canada showed that it's possible by passing their decision, while the US and the EU require clear evidence what's being ruined and demolished and destroyed in Ukraine, not to lose in the courts. Because there were examples like this. There was a compensation commission between Kuwait and Iraq of the first Iraqi war. So under the United Nations, if I'm not mistaken. So we need to argument everything very clearly, and our partners need to demonstrate a political will. Well, then that's it. Tymofiy Mylovanov, the president of the Kyiv Economic School and the advisor on the economic issues of the Chief of Staff of the Office of the President. Please follow the announcements of our next briefing. Stand with Ukraine.